Have you ever tried to quit drinking and thought, man, this is boring? Well, there's a reason why you've thought that. And in this video, I'm going to show you why your life is so boring after you quit drinking alcohol.
This graph here is a dopamine scale. In the real world, the boring, unprocessed, non-GMO organic world, dopamine is released naturally and exists on a scale from 0 to 100. A 100 on the dopamine scale would be something like eating a fig or having sex. A 0 on the dopamine scale would be something like waiting in line at a government office, the DMV, whatever you have in your country. It sucks, it's terrible, we all know it. Alcohol does not fit on this scale, but more on that in a few minutes.
And just a disclaimer, and before you skip this part of the video, let me tell you about the sobriety community that I am building. What you're watching now is a free resource to help you get sober and to help other people get sober. I will engage in the comments as long as I possibly can, and hopefully this community here grows, and as it does, responding to everyone is going to become difficult. So I would like to offer a richer sense of community for those of you who want to do a deeper dive with like-minded individuals. I am an agnostic atheist with a bit of woo-woo, hippie, spiritual fairy dust sprinkled on top. That being said, the traditional approach of finding a Christian God to lean into did me no good when I was trying to get sober. And even though AA is not a Christian organization, it tends to be full of Jesus folks. Again, no ill will towards those people. It's just not my bag, baby. So I will be launching a Pint of Proof community for agnostic atheists who are seeking a purpose-driven life without alcohol. If you're on my email list, you'll be the first to know when it launches, and you'll get to try the first month for free. And I promise you, it will be cheaper than just one trip to the bar. Oh, and I'm not a doctor, so this advice is not to be considered a replacement for medical intervention. I'm just a dude with a camera and an internet connection. Back to the video. If you don't know what dopamine is and how it affects your reward system, do not worry. To understand the concepts in this video, you won't need an extensive understanding of neuroscience or psychiatry. Just know this for now. Dopamine is a motivational chemical released when we experience pleasurable activities to remind us and push us to seek out things that our brain thinks is necessary for survival. The more dopamine that's released, the more important the brain thinks it is. The problem with alcohol is that a massive amount of dopamine is released when we consume it. How much? A fuck ton.
Remember the scale from earlier? You know, the one with the figs in the government office. The government office was at the bottom, figs were at the top. Well, here's another scale to show you the amount of dopamine that's released by alcohol, and it is way off the charts. Imagine if this were a chart that measured seismic activity. The top of the chart would be like a normal human fart. Alcohol would be a volcanic eruption. I know it's weird, I know. But you get it, right?
Our brain adapts to the excessive release of dopamine because our brain likes to keep things balanced. And having a ton of dopamine released all the time, that wouldn't be balanced. So it adapts by making dopamine harder to bind to receptors in our brains, and this causes alcohol to have less of an impact over time. That's why if you drink consistently, you eventually need more alcohol to have the same effect it did when you first started drinking. Studies of non-drinkers compared to drinkers have shown that regular drinkers tend to have less dopamine than their non-drinking counterparts when they aren't drinking. Basically, if you're a regular drinker, you tend to be less happy on average than a non-drinker. And this is where my lack of scientific knowledge starts to kick in. So keep that in mind before I say this next part. The conclusion I am drawing from this is that as a regular drinker, your brain is waiting for your next drinking session to release hormones that make you happy. And your brain, our brain, has learned to regulate the dopamine being released during drinking because you've made a habit. We've made a habit out of it. Your brain and your body have become an alcohol processing machine. So you have to trick your brain into releasing more dopamine than it normally does by drinking more alcohol. This is why if you've ever quit drinking for a period of time and then you return back to the booze, that first drink gets you more buzzed than usual. Lack of pleasure and joy are a normal part of getting sober, and the feelings of being bored, feeling flat, or just generally can last anywhere from 2 months to 1 year, but please don't be discouraged. I'm almost 2 years into not drinking, and I promise you, it is worth fighting for, and it's worth getting through this difficult period. And also please keep in mind that it took time for people like you and I to develop an unhealthy drinking habit, And it's going to also take time to condition your mind and body back to being a non-drinker. As a habitual or problematic drinker, we have made a habit out of giving ourselves unnatural rewards. And as we now know, we have had to adapt to these unnatural rewards by blocking the pleasure receptors in our brain. Keep in mind the study that said regular drinkers typically have less dopamine available as they go about their days than non-drinkers. So when we quit drinking, our brain doesn't know that the reward of alcohol is not coming. So it doesn't allow us to release dopamine in a normal manner. Let's go back to the chart. The thing about these charts are that the normal levels between 0 to 100 apply to a person with a healthy brain, not someone who has conditioned themselves or adapted their bodies to be alcohol processing machines. So what would be a middle of the scale dopamine reward for a normal person, something like a walk or cooking dinner while listening to music, doesn't feel as good because a regular drinker doesn't operate on a normal scale anymore. We have adapted to a much larger scale. We just in general have less dopamine to go around because of the receptors being optimized for alcohol consumption. So why does this cause relapse? Your brain is a problem-solving machine. When you have made a habit of drinking after work every day or every Friday, whatever your pattern is, your brain is programmed to motivate you to find consistent and reliable dopamine. Our brain loves habitual rewards because it takes less effort to obtain, so automating the process helps us and our brain conserve energy. So when you start predictably drinking, your brain starts identifying cues that lead you down the path toward your next drink. This is where the problem lies. When we quit drinking, we have removed the reward that our brain is pushing us towards. When you don't receive your reward, anxiety starts to creep in. And oftentimes, this anxiety causes relapse because alcohol will unfortunately be one of the only things that can trigger a dopamine release during withdrawal and early sobriety. And as we now know, normal dopamine triggers are not enough for active drinkers. But please remind yourself that it took a long time of consistently drinking to develop your bad habit, and it's also going to take a long time to build your new habits. This time period of dopamine depletion, boredom, and like I've said before, feelings of that's why so many people switch over to excessive caffeine, sugar, and other unhealthy, unnatural, supercharged dopamine release habits early on in their sobriety. And while those rewards might work temporarily, personally, I'm after an all-around healthy lifestyle. So if you're anything like me and you want to quit drinking without relying on coffee, sugar, cigarettes, and other addictions, I made this video right here to help you with developing the proper mindset to survive the initial stages of boredom. You got this.